The Chris Johnston Show.
Let's go!
Your number one destination for a behind-the-scenes look at the game of hockey.
Is this thing on?
Here's NHL insider Chris Johnston and host Julian McKenzie.
Siege, it's not every day you hear about a team meeting involving your owner. That's the case for the Buffalo Sabres. Terry Pegula meeting with his players on Monday. The Buffalo Sabres in the midst of a 10-game losing or winless streak, however you want to call it. What do you know about the meeting? What can you say about the Buffalo Sabres right now?
Well, I mean, look, no one around the Sabres really wants to get too deep into this meeting. But, the fact that they don't want to talk about it tells you something. The fact that it happened at all. I mean, it's not unusual for a team owner to go watch his team or her team play somewhere on the road, but, it's not just any road game. That is, his team had lost 10 games in a row. And there's all kinds of rumors swirling around. And on what was supposed to be a practice day at the Bell Center, instead, Pegula came into the dressing room. And, my understanding of what happened was just trying to calm the waters here. And, I think that makes a lot of sense. When you look at Terry Pegula, we're probably going to talk about the Rangers this episode because we do every episode. He's the antithesis of Jim Dolan, who owns the Rangers, right? Jim Dolan's a big personality, demands a lot of the people around him, fires people, just for Sunday breakfast, just for something to do. That's not the way Terry Pegula and his wife Kim operate. I mean, they're known for being patient, both with the Bills and the Sabres. I think we're at a kind of a delicate time of the year too, so close to the Christmas break. And so he didn't go there to fire anyone or to threaten anyone. It was more about trying to just get the players maybe out of their own way a little bit. I mean, when any team loses 10 games in a row in this league, it's more than just the talent on the ice. And clearly Buffalo prior to that run, I believe was up in the lower ends of a playoff spot. So, they've shown that they can at least be a mushy middle team. Right now they're playing like a bottom feeder, and the owner's trying to calm the waters a little bit so that they can win some games, because I don't see any changes coming in the next day or two, if that's what you mean. I don't think it's one of these where, we've got to wait for the bomb to drop.
I mean, they could win against the Canadiens tonight, but something still has to give, right? I mean, it's been, over 13 years since this team has made the playoffs? Like, there's a lot of frustration in Buffalo.
Absolutely. And something has to give, but it doesn't mean it has to give, a week before Christmas. I mean, this is no time to fire someone if you can avoid it. And the league doesn't actually allow you to make changes to your roster as of Thursday night, just before midnight. So, we're basically at the point in the season where the rosters are frozen until just before the new year. And, as I say, I don't think this is the right time to necessarily. I mean, look, Lindy Ruff has been there in his second go round for 30 games or whatever it's been. I mean, it's not like you're firing the coach. I don't know what firing a GM at this point will do. As much as you're probably you want to satisfy your fans in a sense. You want to show them that you're being decisive, that you're going to get your way out of this. Just doing half-cocked thoughts or half-cocked decisions doesn't necessarily accomplish much. So I agree with you. Something's got to give, but I would say let's reboot this in early January. Let's see where the Sabres are at. I mean, they have a handful of games now before the break. Obviously, we'll play right out of Christmas as well. Maybe they can win a few games and things will just stabilize. And obviously in that window leading up to the trade deadline, they'll look to make some improvements. But what I can tell you about the Sabres line of thinking at this point in time is, they're not of a mind where they need to trade another player away. And they've got a few candidates that, are still pretty prized young players that maybe aren't performing up to expectations. I mean, Dylan Cousins is an obvious one to point at. I know other teams are really looking at Bowen Byram just because he's an RFA. The Sabres have a lot of money tied up in their blue line. Teams have been wondering maybe he could be a fit for them longer term. Jack Quinn. There's lots of players on this roster that if the Sabres, and I got to emphasize if, wanted to trade, I think would have value, but they're not giving these guys away. And especially if you're coming after one of their top end guys, the players that play in their top six or on their top four, their D, I mean, they're going to ask for an equivalent back. And so, could that lead to something bigger down the road? I would say yes. But at this point in time, that's not on the table. I think really what's more happening is, just like we have the standings page on NHL.com, so do the other GMs. The other front offices are looking around for teams they feel might be vulnerable, might be in a position where they have to make kind of a panic move. And that's, where some of the discussions have gone in Buffalo. But, certainly the Sabres are open to making moves. I don't think they're going to necessarily get anything done before this trade freeze kicks in this week. And so let's see where we're at in the new year when that lifts, and maybe we will have a little more perspective on what happened after this big meeting in Montreal.
So I know we're going to get to Vancouver, but when you hear that rumored or proposed trade from Elliott about Elias Pettersson for Dylan Cousins and Bo Byram, what say you?
Well, I don't think it's. Look at. I actually didn't hear how Elliott said it, so I got to be careful. But I don't think that trade's happening.
No, to be clear, I think it was just a proposal and not a rumor. I think he proposed it. That's my understanding.
The thing is, when you got Elliott's him just trying to piece things together gets conflated with him reporting something. I have zero reason to believe that that's in the works. It's not to say it can't happen. I mean, look at where the Canucks are at with Pettersson. I don't see them in a spot where they're anxious to trade this guy. I think they'd like him to play a little more consistently. Wasn't hard to read into some comments from Rick Tocchet about, certain players not being engaged enough energy wise in the game and point to Elias Pettersson as one of the players on the roster he was referencing. Although it must be said, it's probably other guys too. Niels Höglander, other guys, it's not just one player there. And, I guess if we want to sit back and play fantasy GM, that trade maybe makes some sense, but I don't, as I say, I don't want to be out here stomping on anyone else's reports. I think no one should have the expectation that is going to happen at this point in time, but I can't rule anything out in the future. I mean, two things to know on Pettersson is he just started his 8-year contract extension he signed last year. But his no movement clause doesn't kick in until July 1st. And so and I got to say this 7,000 times, if the Canucks are ever feeling the need to get out from under that, they have the ability to do so without his consent to which team he would go to, all the way right up until free agency opens in the summer. And so to me, if that's a huge if, I would not expecting this to happen. I would think though that's a move you might look at when you see what happened the rest of the season, what happens in the playoffs. Now maybe something gets put in front of you before then that you make that move. It would be, by NHL standards, that would be a blockbuster. I mean, we're talking about players still in the primes of their career. In Pettersson's case has been, at his best, one of the top players in the league. Cousins and Byram are both, highly sought after young, accomplished guys. So, I just don't want to give it any fuel or life. I don't think that's what the Canucks are focused on. And frankly, I don't think it's what the Sabres are focused on. I mean, if we're talking about Buffalo, they're worried about finding ways to get their team better. I think that they're very concerned about what they might erase off their roster in a trade. They have to feel some certainty because obviously, we've seen other players leave this team over a lot of years. Not all of them, Kevin Adams' decisions. I'm talking his predecessors too, as GM, but they've traded a lot of players away that have had tons of success elsewhere. And for understandable reasons, they don't want to repeat that cycle of failure. Even if it feels like it's more of the same right now, I think they have to be mindful not to make some of the errors of the past. And so oddly, patience might be, it's definitely the hardest thing right now. I mean, you lost 10 straight games. You can only imagine what that feels like in the dressing room, in the ownership suite, for the front office, taking calls and texts from people like me every day, just like, what's going on? What's that? It's just not a pleasant place to be in. But, I think you have to be very mindful of not making a big mistake when you're under that kind of pressure.
Pierre LeBrun would say the Buffalo Sabres got 3 points in that 10-game stretch. Just saying. That's why he would call it a winless streak.
I know Pierre's he's leaning into his old mandom, but it's like, dude, get a new trope. I feel like 15 years he's been hitting us over the head with that. I get it. Maybe you technically can't call it a 10-game losing streak. You can still say they lost 10 games in a row. That is by the book, by definition. If you wrote that in your copy, Julian, and I was editing the story, that gets by me every time. That's factually correct.
Yes, I like that. Since we mentioned the Vancouver Canucks, did you see anything from Jim Rutherford on After Hours over the weekend? Or just what can you say about the Vancouver Canucks situation? And do you think they're close to making a move?
Well, they're certainly getting itchy, I'd say. And, we know that this is a front office, and Jim Rutherford in particular, that likes to get a jump on the competition when it comes to the trading window. He got Elias Lindholm last year on January 31st at the All-Star weekend. But a full month plus ahead of the trade deadline. Zadorov, he made that deal early too. Last season doesn't wait right into the last minute. So, I don't think they're going to necessarily squeeze anything here under the deadline that's, only open for another day or so. But on the other side of the holidays, I certainly think they're a team to watch. And, the main need that they've identified is a top four defenseman, which are not easy to find, don't tend to be cheap to acquire, but, they're down Philip Hronek and, it's been difficult for them. Vinny Desharnais, they signed the offseason, has kind of been in and out of the lineup. Like they feel they don't have the right mix there. And so I'd say their number one priority is finding a way to stabilize the blue line. I've just rolled out another trade board. There are some defensemen out there. You wonder, like I'd say that for me, the big rental defenseman, I mean, there's probably two of them, but Ivan Provorov in Columbus is one, and Marcus Pettersson, who's actually currently out injured in Pittsburgh. But assuming that injury isn't anything, at this point doesn't sound anything too serious, I think that they'll be the two main rental defensemen. Obviously there's some familiarity with Pettersson. Alvin and Jim Rutherford were with the Penguins organization, and Pettersson's played there a while. I think that those are maybe some of the glitzier options, but what do you want to give up at this point in time? Are you comfortable trading for rental with the possibility you're giving up a fair bit and not signing them? I mean, there's a lot to be weighed there, but and I also don't think the Canucks will let this window pass without chasing at least one more forward too. Someone who can score off the wing maybe to help out their forward group. So, I think that they'll be relatively all in when all is said and done on March 8th at 3 p.m. Eastern time when the trade deadline bell rings. Ideally for them, I think they'd like to have a lot of the action happen in the nearer term than that far down the road. But, you get the sense, a lot went right for the Canucks last year. Like it has to be said, like they had a tremendous season. They got, within a game of playing in the conference final, like everything worked. This year they've contended with a lot of injuries. They obviously had this long absence when JT Miller took a personal leave. There's just been a lot of things. They're still in pretty good spot in the standings, I would say, given how rocky it's been or how much more challenging it's been. And so I think ownership and management will respond and give that group of players a chance to have the sort of playoff success they have last year, and of course try to take it farther than just Game 7 of the second round.
Okay, we've started with Buffalo. That went into Vancouver. I was going to do Buffalo to the Rangers, but it just naturally went to Vancouver. So now we can go to the New York Rangers. What's the latest out of there? It just seems like turmoil every day with that franchise.
Well, the turmoil, it's on a couple parts. You don't get the feeling that everyone is in alignment there, right? And, I think that that's somewhat normal when you have gone through the kind of stretch they have. I actually don't have the record now. I've lost track. I think they're 3-7 in their last 10. But certainly since, you go back 3 weeks plus when that now, I guess, kind of infamous trade email leaked, you wondered how would the team respond? Well, it hasn't gone well on the ice. This past weekend in particular, they get spanked at home by LA. They're kind of booed off the ice at MSG. You see Peter Laviolette make a series of sweeping changes for their game Sunday in St. Louis. He takes Capo Caco out of the lineup, drops Kreider to the fourth line, moves all the pieces around, doesn't get the response he wants. They lose another game there. So, I do think that they are looking for answers. I don't have the answer for where the ball is going to drop next, but, I can't see them being patient. I mean, they might be patient through Christmas because, again, there's certain limitations of what you can and can't do in league rules. And we are getting very close to that roster freeze kicking in. But, it's snowballing. It feels like, there's just not that synergy, that connection. And maybe, I half jokingly said, like, I don't know, do they just need like a big team party right now? Like, do they need a session to blow off steam? Maybe to, it sounds like there's been, I know Steve Dangle talked about a players only meeting the Rangers had that he heard about. I've heard that there's been multiple players only meetings. It sounds like there's been more than one. And so, I think that they've done a lot of talking and I guess you call that soul searching in a sense. I mean, that's typically what that's about. But this is a real head scratcher. I can't think of anything like this in recent memory in hockey. I mean, I had a buddy said to me, it kind of reminds you of like what you'd expect from the Mets. And I'm like, oh, that's not good. If you're getting compared to the Mets, that's usually not a good thing. But, we're talking about a top team, last season, the top team in the regular season made it to the third round of playoffs, had what I would call negligible changes to their roster, had a reasonably good October, and they just seem like they can't get out of their own way ever since. I mean, and now, look, you don't want to follow the extremes too far because usually the truth's somewhere in the middle. But, you just sense like how are they going to win a game? How are they going to string together what they're going to do? I mean, they just signed Shesterkin to this monster deal. What's next? And I think that they have to find those solutions internally. But in the meantime, management, like my sense of the Capo Caco thing, like I think both sides want a fresh start there. I don't think this is just, his name's been in trade rumors in the past, last season in particular. Even when they signed him to the 1-year deal last year before, his qualifying offer, I didn't get the sense it was like a 1-year deal, kind of like, okay, we'll lock you up, but we'll see. It wasn't a guarantee that things are going to be different. And it just seems like he's had 3 head coaches in New York. All 3 of them have scratched him at some point. I don't, I think what did Laviolette call it? Fresh legs, but it just feels like he might be a piece. He's certainly featured on the trade board, as is Chris Kreider. I think that there's going to be more changes to come. It's just, this isn't a situation where they can't just ride it out at this point.
I have a theory. You can just tell me if I'm off base or not. Mm-hmm. If the Rangers were to fire Peter Laviolette, why do I feel like that would make things worse? I'll hang up and listen.
I don't know if it would make it worse, but I would just say to you, who is a clear upgrade that you can go sign today as a coach? I mean, what are they, 4 years since Dave Quinn was their coach? 2 years ago was Gerard Gallant that walked the plank after 2 years. Now you're not even, like Peter Laviolette has had a ton of success in the league, a ton. And I'm not saying this just as a defense of him, but he's about as experienced as you can get. He's been to multiple Stanley Cup finals with different organizations. There's almost nothing this guy hasn't seen. I don't know who else, like who can you lobby would be better? Like, it's not like the voice should be getting tired at this point. Like, I get it. I'm sure there's so much frustration. I'm sure hate is a tough word, but I'm sure everyone is tired of everyone right now. I'm sure the players are tired of the coach. Certainly management has been a little overbearing with the team. And I think players feel it with the way things were handled with Trouba, with the way things were handled in the summer with Barclay Goodrow. I'm sure the coaching staff is looking at the players some nights and going like, these guys are bums. Like when you go through this stretch, like that's all normal hockey talk. I have to say, like whether it's not acceptable in other jobs. Like if we described our bosses that way at the Athletic or they described us that way, it wouldn't be good. HR would be on line one. But like, this is what happens. Like, it's a highly competitive environment. This is the behind the scenes. Like, everyone is frustrated there. And so I guess my point is, I just don't know who is better. Like, would you bring Joel Quenneville in? Obviously he's the only coach that's available that has a stronger resume, I guess, than Peter Laviolette. I guess you could go with younger coaches that you'd be giving a second look at, like Jay Woodcroft, for example, is looking for another opportunity. Todd McClellan is a very steady hand that's out there. But I just don't know that you can look at the roster of available coaches right now and say, like, this is 100% an upgrade. This is going to change the course of this season right now. In fact, maybe the better play is to draw the line in the sand and say to the players, look, we've been through this with other coaches. Like, this is not, you're not getting that exit door today. You got to find your way through this yourselves, or we're going to swap in players that can.
I'll just say this. I'm not even thinking about it from the sense of who's a better fit at head coach. I just wonder if the players are just pissed at Chris Drury. That has to be it.
Well, I'm going to hit the same drum again. I don't think anyone is happy with anyone right now.
Fair.
So, like, here's the thing. This is, from the outside perspective, this is one thing I'll say that people might not realize. There is a huge difference in an organization. Like, I'm trying to stretch it out. Like, the fish was this big between where the players are and where, like, management and ownership are. Like, it doesn't, like, I hate to say it, it doesn't really matter what the players think. Like, it matters, don't get me wrong, but the players don't get to choose who builds the team. Like, that's like 3 or 4 rungs above, like, where their thoughts should be. And so I'm not saying that Chris Drury's decisions haven't caught the attention negatively of those guys. Like, but they don't choose who employs them, just as you don't hire your boss. It's just not the way it goes. And I can't think of a situation that I know of where a player ever got a GM fired. Ever. Can you think of one?
Can't think of one. Not immediately.
There's probably, off the top of my head, there might be 5 players in recent memory that would have had the influence to potentially get a GM fired. and none of them have used it. Like if Sidney Crosby got to a point in Pittsburgh where he's like, we need a new GM, he could do that. But like, that's the last thing. I mean, Sidney Crosby is the other end of the scale. He does not get too involved in what goes on day to day. He knows his role. Like he's all about preparing, helping the team, but he's leaving those decisions to management. And so, I'm with you. They may not like it, but you don't get to choose your boss at the end of the day. I mean, as much as you get in these situations, I think the best thing you can do is hold a mirror up and find a way to be better yourself. And as I mentioned, this team should not be where it is in the standings. This team shouldn't be losing the games it has and the manner it has with the current, like this is with no changes, but something is not working there. And maybe ultimately, because this is what happens so often in our sport, maybe ultimately it is the coach that gets fired because it is, a big change that's relatively easy, albeit costly in this case, if the Rangers were to go down that road. But I don't have any reason to believe Drury's in danger in New York. I think he's very much in charge. I think he knows the owner. I think he's got the faith of him. And so, where we go from here is those players have to figure out how to be better. Or again, I just think they're going to keep trading guys. I think they're going to they're not afraid to. Obviously, they muscled their captain out of there. They've dangled their longest tenured player in Chris Kreider. And, they put Barclay Goodrow on waivers in the summer. So there's no reason to think they're going to stop there if they feel more changes would help.
Buried under the lead here, was Steve Dangle right about the Rangers?
I think so. I don't know exactly what Steve said, but I know that his comments from the latest SDP are going around a little bit. So yeah, look at the players only meeting. Not that Steve needs verification. I know that there have been multiple players only meetings. I don't know specifically about what he reported about them demanding, making any specific demands on Drury. But as I say, it all lines up with what I've heard. And, we should expect a team in this kind of disarray a team in disarray is basically the headline here. And they probably need they obviously need some wins because that usually calms things down. And they need the Christmas break as much as anyone to get a few days away from the rink and reset, because at the end of the day, would you be surprised if the Rangers made the playoffs? Like I wouldn't, even after all this. They got too many good players to not have this reverse course at some point.
Hey everyone, I'm Julian McKenzie, and Chris Johnston has decided to join me to talk to you guys about why Mint Mobile is so great. Thanks to Ryan Reynolds for Mint Mobile, by the way. We really appreciate you, buddy. Friends don't let friends overpay for wireless. I think that's pretty true. Isn't that right, CJ?
Yeah, I would never let a friend overpay for wireless, especially when Mint Mobile is offering premium services starting at $15 a month.
Come on, that's such a good deal. And all their plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You could use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your own phone number along with all of your existing contacts. It just makes perfect sense.
$15, you can't even get a beer for that at an NHL game.
That needs to change. But that's a whole other ad in itself. Ditch overpriced wireless with Mint Mobile's deal and get 3 months of premium wireless service for $15 a month. And if you want to take advantage of this customer offer in your new 3-month premium wireless plan for $15 a month, mintmobile.com/Johnston. CJ, your last name is not that hard to spell.
Johnston. Get on Mint Mobile.
$45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. This episode of the Chris Johnston Show is brought to you by Saily. This is a really cool eSIM that you can use whenever you get to traveling all over the world. With Saily, an eSIM only needs to be installed once, and it eliminates the need for users to install a new SIM in each country. They have some affordable prices, some global and regional plans as well, and you can never run out of data. Don't run out of data at the worst possible moment. We'll just notify you when you go to 80% or over on your data. You can top up your plan with just a few clicks. Get an exclusive 15% discount on Saily data plans. Use code Johnston at checkout. Download the Saily app or go to saily.com/Johnston. Okay, Siege, what can you say about Anthony Stolarz? What's the latest with him?
Yeah, unfortunately, he's had a setback. I mean, the Leafs didn't think it was anything serious when he left the game last weekend. But when they got looking around in his knee, there was a piece of fragment that was floating around in there. And, they were able to do a small procedure to remove it. But, the result of that, of course, is there's going to be a recovery here. And the timeline they've laid out is 4 to 6 weeks, which is a tough bit of news, I think, especially for Stolarz. I mean, how well he's played. He's never played this many NHL games in one stretch. Really had got to a point where he was the Leafs' unquestioned number one with his performance. And, now he's got a small setback. Now, I think the Leafs are in a position because Joseph Woll has played great alongside him this year. And they like the depth they have in the organization that they can get through this window without him. But, it doesn't sound very comfortable to have something floating around in your knee. And oddly, I can speak to this from strange experience, although I'm not an NHL goaltender. And, secondly, I think that this is going to force the Leafs we'll see if they can lean on that depth. I mean, it's going to be Dennis Hildeby with Woll here until Christmas, I would expect. But, wouldn't be surprised on the other side of the holiday if Matt Murray reemerges and gets his chance back at the NHL level, which, of course, has been a long road back for Matt. Missed all of last season after having a hip procedure. Did get into a couple games in the AHL at the end of last year, and then he's been down there and battled through some health issues this season. But, he's playing again for the Marlies, and he's very much on the radar to at least get some NHL starts with the Leafs in this window while Stolarz is out.
So what happened to your knee? You just brought that up just casually. What happened? It's
a weird one. But why not? I mean, it's off the rails anyway. So a couple years ago, I'll call it 5 or 6. I don't remember the exact date. It was before the pandemic, but I was running one time at night, and I was running alongside sort of an area that was under construction. They were building something. And so there was a temporary fence beside me, and unbeknownst to me, something was sticking out of the temporary fence at about shin height. And by the time I realized that, I'd already tripped over it mid-stride, bashed my right knee into the pavement, and actually even hit my forehead on the ground. Like, it happened so quick, I didn't even fully brace for it. So, in that moment, you're like, it didn't feel good, as you would imagine. And it was that night, it was dark. So I'm feeling my forehead, and like, I could tell there's a bit of blood. It didn't seem like, I could tell it wasn't like flowing out of me at a gross rate. But I make my way home, obviously clean myself up, clean up the wound. I did have a rip in my pants, running pants, and on my right knee, I had a wound there, and like cleaned that up. Didn't think much of it, went to bed and woke up in the morning and literally could not bend my leg. Like, I'm talking, for me, I've been fortunate. I haven't had that much pain in my life probably. So, but for me, it was as excruciating amount of pain as I've ever been in. I was home alone, so I had to somehow get dressed, not being able to bend your leg, skulk around my apartment, call up an Uber because I definitely couldn't drive, get taken to the hospital, wait in the ER, the whole thing. They give me an x-ray, and then the doctor's like, "Hey, did you have surgery on your knee when you were a kid?" I was like, "I don't think so. Not that I remember that I was ever told about." And he's like, "Oh, weird." He's like, "Something's in there." I'm like, "Something's in there." And then he looks a little closer, and there's actually a screw that had penetrated the skin on my knee when I took that fall. No. And was just embedded in there. And so in the middle of this hospital ER, literally the doctor just like using like pliers or something. I'm sure they're medical version of pliers, but something like pliers, just pulled it out of my knee when I was around like 20 other people in the, like, it wasn't like a private room with, like, I don't even remember being put under. I just remember being very painful, but he had to get it out right then and there.
Don't listen to this segment while eating, people. Ugh.
No, gross. Sorry. This maybe should have come with a disclaimer.
Gross. You weren't even under for that?
No, I wasn't. Definitely not. Like, literally, I think once he realized what it was, he was like, "We have to get this," because it's a foreign object, right?
Yeah.
And then naturally I had to go on like antibiotics to make sure I didn't have any infection. Like, fortunately, it all worked well. I was walking gingerly for weeks. Like, after going through even just that kind of trauma on the front of your knee, like, I can't imagine. Obviously, these guys are getting better care, but I just was reminded of it because I have this x-ray picture where you can see my knee and you can see this dot, and that dot is a screw. And I kind of wondered, is that what it looked like for Anthony Stolarz when they found this piece of a small pebble? I think Brad Treliving called it. Someone told me it was more like a fragment, but whatever. As if they looked at his knee and it was like, "Hey, there's this thing in here. We got to get this out." So tough news for Stolarz and the Leafs, because they there was a world before they found that he was starting, at least a game before Christmas, and now, might not be back. We'll see how that timeline plays out. But if it's the 6 weeks, he might be gone almost right until the Four Nations face-off.
Anything else you want to add on the Leafs before we move on here?
No, other than that, it's pretty boring around the Leafs. I mean, a lot of the drama is happening in the state of New York, it seems like these days.
It does feel like that. Can we touch on the Sens a little bit here? They're about to start a 9-game road trip. I'm actually in Seattle right now for the start of it. A lot of people think this road trip could make or break their season, but they've turned the corner, it looks like. They're back above 500. They're in a playoff spot. What have you made of their last few games? And Linus Ullmark, the third star of the week from last week, he's been great too.
Well, I mean, it's been great to see them get back into the mix, because I think a lot of people are expecting it this year. But man, what a gauntlet this 9-game trip is. It's cool that you're going to be there to cover it for The Athletic and, see them through those games. I got to tell you, from my days when I used to cover the Leafs on the road, my favorite trips, quite honestly, were the Western Canada swings. It just was always fun for, Canada on Canada games and great vibe. Obviously, top-notch hockey cities. But, for the Sens to get right back to this playoff spot and then have 9 straight road games, obviously with the break at home briefly for the holidays in the middle of it, that I think that is make or break. Because if you come back and let's say you just go 5-4, forget all these overtime losses and all these new fandangle things. You're probably still reasonably in the playoff window, or maybe a point out or in, whatever, but you're going to be feeling pretty good about it. If they go 2-7, like the whole feeling by the time we get in the new year, it's going to be like, oh, same old Sens, not even like, unfortunately, that's the world they live in. Like you'd love to be able to view everything calmly from a distance, but this team is, they're fighting to be relevant again. They're fighting to be in the playoff race, like truly, the way the Sabres are and the Red Wings and a few other teams around the league. And so it's comes at, it could be the best or worst time ever is the way I'd put it. I could see it, really putting some, wind in their sails if they're able to get through this and come home with a decent record and be in a good playoff spot. And, just by the math, it means there's going to be a lot more home games in the next little stretch after that. But it could also be a debilitating stretch. And so for me, it's like, wow, this is a get your popcorn ready. I got to catch some late night Sens games to see, where this team is going to be sitting after, probably these first 4 games, but then on the other side of the break as well.
3 back-to-backs on this road trip, by the way. This week, this weekend they got Vancouver, Edmonton is one back-to-back. When they get back from the holiday break, Winnipeg, Minnesota is another one, and then Dallas, St. Louis is another one. 3 back-to-backs. It's like you'd say a gauntlet. It's a literal gauntlet for this team, and that's tough. That is tough. I'm not going to be there for all of it, but that's tough.
I will say at least, I feel bad for anyone who has to cover that every game, just because if you're flying commercially, that's punishing. But I was going to say, at least those are all natural cities to play back to back in. Like the travel won't be too onerous for the chartered flights, but you're right. What it tells you too is you need 2 goaltenders to get through that stretch, right? And you tell me, because you're around the team every day, you have a feel for the room certainly that I don't have. But it feels like Ullmark is. If you're pointing at 1 or 2 reasons why this has turned around of late, it feels like he's got to be reason number 1, right? Like just the performance he's given. And so to me, I wonder how much do they play him? What are they going to get out of the number 2 spot? Because you can't, in the old school NHL, you just you give the guy an ice pack and play him all those games when you needed to win. But that's not the way it works anymore.
I mean, Anton Forsberg's not healthy. He got hurt over the weekend in like a pregame stretch. And they called up Levi Merilainen from the Belleville Senators. Like, they might have to play Linus Ullmark for the first 4 games of this stretch. They might have to. Right.
So I would say maybe 1 set of back-to-backs at the start it's not the worst thing in the world, because he's going to have the 3-day break after it. Right. So yes, it's an overload in a small window, but you're probably also worried, he's not a young man. Like you don't want to get him injured. Like imagine you overplay him, forget just the wins and losses for those 4 games. Like what happens if he gets injured and he's out too? Like then what do you do? I mean, I don't envy this position. And that's why I think there's it's such a compelling time and, cool that you're going to be there to document it. And I hope it's not chaotic, although, sometimes chaos sells in our business. It could be, maybe you're going to be seeing more e-bugs or whatever like they had the other night at back home there. So
insane.
Yeah, but it's running down the street, the e-bug. Like, was he late?
So my understanding was that dude was in his car with his girlfriend and he was listening to the radio before the game. And when he heard that Anton Forsberg wasn't available to go, like that's what made him get out the car and run towards the CTC. And he still got there like 20 minutes before his girlfriend did. Like, that's insane.
Was he on the ice for warmups?
No, he was not on the ice for warmups. He showed up
because the injury happened during warmups, right? So
the injury happened like just before the teams got on the ice, like during some kind of stretch. That's my understanding.
Okay.
Like it didn't happen while they were on the ice, and at least from what video I saw from Sportsnet, dude showed up with his gear and he was wearing like a signed Josh Norris jersey. Like he was wearing a jersey of one of his teammates. I find that part of the story so funny. And he just sat in a dressing room like the whole time, like ready to play. And technically he was still eligible to play for either side. So I think that explains why he wasn't on the bench for the Sens. But that I was really confused about it because I've seen it where like an e-bug is available for one team and they have them on the bench. I've seen it like in Calgary, they had Dusty Nickel as an available e-bug where he warmed up, he wore a Flames jersey and everything. But Zach Dietz is the name of the guy. He was, my understanding now is that he was technically still available for both teams. So that's why he wasn't on the ice.
Yeah. And that's actually consistent with everywhere because there is only one e-bug at each arena. Mm-hmm. So I guess it's just more of a personal team choice, whether they put him on the bench or how they want to navigate that. I mean, remember David Ayres worked for the Leafs. Like he's the most famous e-bug of them all. He had to go in for Carolina because Carolina got 2 injuries in that game and he beat the team that he technically worked for, did some work for the Marlies, I believe at the time, which was just an added element. It was like a guy that they all knew, like he'd been on the ice at practice with the Leafs and stuff as often these e-bug type third goaltenders or fourth goalie, whatever we want to call them. They're almost like bullpen catchers in a polite way. Like they're not really eligible ever to be in the game unless you absolutely have to put them there. Yeah, strange stuff. Anyway, I must say I like the stories. I know some people are over it. I still think it's kind of cool, but other people think it makes a big time league look Mickey Mouse or what have you. Like I have time for both arguments, but it's also pretty cool when one of these guys gets in, even if it's just for 20 seconds.
Yeah, well, hopefully for the Senators' sake, they don't have to.
I know a few e-bugs too, so I'm almost like tainted because I know what a thrill it is for them, even to just. Not even just to get in the game, but just to like maybe you're getting the game. Like I can't even imagine. Like there's nothing else like that. You're literally, and I get like these people have some kind of goaltending experience, but that's as close as we get to seeing someone getting plucked off the street to be in an NHL environment. Yeah. What sport, if you had to be an E something, like what sport would you least embarrass yourself at?
Probably soccer. Probably like just have me as like an extra defender on the bench or something. Like I would think that's the sport I'd embarrass myself least. You?
I would embarrass myself in absolutely every one of them.
I mean, we all know we're going to embarrass ourselves. You have to find the least.
Maybe I could like hold my own in like professional blackjack or something. Like I could at least like.
No, don't know. Boo, boo. But that's not acceptable for this exercise.
I mean it literally. Like no, like I wouldn't even joke that I could go on the ice with actual NHLers even for one shift and pretend I can hold my own. None of the big sports.
Not even hockey. Not even. You don't even want to recreate 3 goals in 21 seconds.
No, I would love to, but I'm very realistic about how good these guys are and how far from that I am. So,
producer Drew also hates your answer, by the way.
Well, I mean, I'm just being serious. Like even like obviously the thing I'm most into now personally when it comes to fitness is running. But like I'm aware of like I'm a pretty slow average Joe runner. Like let alone actually going where I got no chance. Basically, is the point. Maybe you could throw me in a bobsled.
You know what? SDPN team bobsled would be really fun.
Like if I wasn't in charge of steering or anything, like I could probably keep my cookies down and just sit in one of those bobsleds. Like I know it would be crazy.
Keep your cookies down. Okay. You're not gonna help us run with the Sure. All right. I might as well get to run in that. Fine. Let us know in the comments what sport you would think you'd least embarrass yourself in. I'm glad we did like overdo it and say like baseball or football, because we definitely would.
Dude, I'll tell you, I've even played some pickleball, and it's not a big court, right? And again, I do run, so like I can get around it okay. But and when you go to these pickleball games, often you just end up against the random people that are there. And like I'm going up against like 70-year-old men who can't really move around the court, and they still just whoop me because they know where to hit it. So like my point is, I couldn't even answer a sport like pickleball because I know amateurs, like even people that are like in less good shape than I am, can still kill me at pickle. Like, so I have no answer. I just know anyway. So I'm the number 3 on the bobsled team.
Are you trying to say your screw knee is holding you back from beating these geriatric folks in pickleball?
Pre-screwed. Before I had a screw in my knee, I had a chance. But now I'm getting mopped up on the pickleball court too.
Oh no, I didn't expect that. I didn't expect that to play so much into your origin story. Oh man. So these runs you do every day, like, no, it's okay.
I was going to say sorry to Anthony Stolarz. We're actually not making light of his injury now. It's just morphed into us talking about my old one.
No. So the fact that you're doing these runs every day, like, you're like borderline bionic, man.
Yeah. I mean, there's I have a little scar on my kneecap. I have a little scar on my kneecap to remind me of where I've been.
Oh man. I'll get us back on the train here. Any thoughts on the trade from the last few days involving the Anaheim Ducks and the St. Louis Blues, which sends Cam Fowler to St. Louis?
Yeah, just quickly. I mean, a long time coming. You know, Cam Fowler almost got to 1,000 career games with Anaheim, gets traded just a little ahead of that huge milestone. But yeah, I think he wants at this stage of his career to play for a winning team, and he and the team had been working, I think, in lockstep really back to the summer. I know St. Louis had some discussions with Anaheim back then and finally got to a deal that makes sense. And so, for the Blues, they've been kind of ravaged by injury. They're pretty thin on the left side. I mean, they have the oldest skater in the league right now, and Ryan Suter playing pretty heavy minutes there. Nick Leddy's down with an injury. And so Cam Fowler just immediately steps into their top 4 and I think helps them get a little bit better balance. And Anaheim kept money back in the deal. So it's Cam Fowler at $4 million. It's not Cam Fowler at full freight. And, in terms of what it means next, I wonder on both sides of the ledger here. I think St. Louis is a team we could still see make a trade. There's been, a fair bit of talk about Brandon Saad being available, happens to make just about the same amount of money as Cam Fowler's new cap hit. So maybe we see him get moved on. And I think for Anaheim, we'll see a little bit more of this as we get close to the deadline. And I do wonder, after basically being a CJ's big board mainstay for 3 years, if at some point this season we see John Gibson get a new home, because he's sort of similar to Fowler in terms of, he's a link to the last great Ducks teams. He's been there. He's been a loyal player, been a top end player at his best, but the time has probably come for them to flip the page. So I think it's one of those trades that makes a lot of sense for everyone involved, and it hints at what's to come when we get back in the new year.
Okay. Siege, do you have time to answer some questions for Ask CJ?
Yes, I'm still battling a cold here, so I'm sweaty and anxious. So let's keep it short, maybe.
Yes, you're doing great so far. Here's one from
It's my flu pod. I know we've had some in the past, but this is another flu pod.
This is definitely your flu pod. From Dr. Sun off of Blue Sky. Hi, Connor McDavid's dog half stole the show for his 1,000 point celebration. Did you have any memorable moments with players, staff, pets while doing your job? Cheers. I feel like there's maybe one answer to this question for you.
What do you mean one?
Well, maybe there's probably more, but there's one that like stands out that like is part of your lore. Technically.
You're stressing me out because I don't know what the hell you're talking about.
The San Jose Shark mascot. You were doing the on-air thing.
Well, I don't think of him as an animal. Behind. He's a.
Well, I mean, like, what do you have as what was your answer going to be?
Well, I will say over the years, the Leafs have had their dogs around the dressing room a fair bit. It's more in the old days, but I remember like Travis Dermott like having his dog in the dressing room. Like it's normal. I feel like a lot of teams do this, especially like the Leafs do an outdoor practice every year where they basically skate outdoors with fans at Nathan Phillips Square. Always the dogs are stealing the show there. Like usually the players' dogs are running around on the ice, and certainly part of the social posts that go up. So I guess I did have my brush with fame with Sharky, the Sharks mascot, but I'm worried he would be offended if I referred to him as an animal, because I don't know what a mascot technically is.
Fair. This one from Starzy. What's the best hockey-related Christmas present CJ has ever gotten or given?
Ooh. So my best Christmas presents were all hockey-related, I'd say, over the years. One of the ones that really stands out is I got an Easton aluminum back in the day, like a black and gray, like a very fancy stick that certainly at that day and age, my parents were never going to be buying for me as a regular stick. And I remember how pumped I was for that. That was the same stick that Gretzky used. He previously repped Titans. For those that are old enough, he used to do white and red Titans. They were a wood stick. And then he got a deal with Easton. I think it must have been around the time he went to the Kings, because they were sort of in Kings colors. And I got one of those sticks. I can't remember what year it would have been, but I got a Doug Gilmour jersey in that same kind of era, which was pretty cool for me. I mean, even when I remember getting my first Nintendo as a Christmas gift, but the main game I got that I was pumped about was Blades of Steel, which is a hockey game. So even when it's like a pleasant present that had nothing to do with hockey, it still was, because then I could play hockey on video game. I mean, definitely as a kid, I'd like to think I have more well-rounded interests now, but I was pretty hockey as a kid. So if you were buying for me at that age, you couldn't really go wrong with any sort of hockey-related gift.
From Hayden, where does CJ land on the Anze Kopitar might be the most underrated player of his generation discourse?
Ooh. Now, Anze's won the Selke, hasn't he?
Surely he has, yes. Yeah, totally.
I don't know if he's underrated. Amazing player. Now, I think naturally, look at, if you play games that start at 10 or 10:30 Eastern time for your whole career, just naturally more of the population is based in the East. Like I'm not here to say right or wrong. I'm not even defending East Coast bias, but I'm just saying it exists for a reason. And so maybe he didn't get quite as much focus or spotlight as he should have over those years. I mean, he's also from Slovenia, which is actually a great story, but it's not a country, of course, that produces high-level hockey players. So he didn't even get extra pump in his homeland, maybe the same way. Although I do remember Slovenia having a pretty memorable win in Sochi. I was covering the game, and Anze, I remember, was a big part of that. I wish I could remember who they beat off the top of my head, but they had a win at the Olympics. And I remember how proud he was to be able to be part of that naturally. So I feel like, we're talking about a surefire Hall of Famer, multi-time Selke Trophy winner, multi-time Cup winner. I mean, his career numbers are going to look great. He's still producing points at a pretty reasonable rate given his age. I guess he could have got a bit more pump, but I don't know what this most underrated thing, because like now is Alex Barkov the most underrated? I'm like, to me, he's just rated. Like he's
we don't need to include.
But he had Mr. Underrated
anymore.
For like 8 years. You know what I mean?
He did, but he's graduated from that.
Right.
Absolutely, yes.
I mean, it's fair, but it's such a weird discussion, because I feel like a lot of these guys are actually rated. It's just, if you play in certain markets and you're as good as some of the players are, like, there's just going to be lots of attention on you. Like, this, the way it is. I mean, Connor McDavid deserves a lot of attention.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay. Anyway, I'll give you one more here.
Sorry, my cranky cold and cough CJ's coming out. I'm not actually cranky, but the question, I'm just like, my brain is only functioning at 60%.
No, I can tell you're cranky. Let's last one here from John. This is actually a fun one to ask.
I'm so cranky. I'm basically arguing with myself in the middle of answering the question from the listener. Like, that's how bad it is.
Let me just ask this last one, man. We'll get you out of here. Julian and CJ have to go on vacation together. It could be anywhere in the world at any time of the year. You're going for a full 2 weeks. Where are we going on vacation?
A full 2 weeks.
Yes.
And what was the other part of it?
We have to go on vacation together. It could be anywhere in the world at any time of the year, and it's a full 2 weeks.
Oh, wow. Okay. So there's not really a lot of guardrails there.
No. So literally we could just decide we could just go wherever we want.
So what is your preference if you just had any 2 week window anywhere in the year?
Man,
because a lot of my thoughts go to like, hey, if we were taking a vacation in season, I would be like, for sure, we got to go somewhere warm because we both live in cold weather climates and, that's the thing. But if we're taking a July or August vacation, you can do different things because the weather isn't much a part of the decision.
Japan is my pick. I want to see how we do in Japan.
Wow.
Because I want to go to Japan.
I've been to Japan once. It's actually, I would describe it as probably the most interesting place I've ever been.
Okay. I think we'd have fun in Japan or somewhere warm. I don't know. I think
all right,
well, be a good travel buddy.
If we do Japan, we need to bring someone from social media from SDPN. We need the content of us just like navigating, ordering food or eating the food that looks a little different than what you're expecting or getting around or just, it's such a cool place, Japan. So none of this don't construe it as a bad thing, but it's truly a foreign place if you're from our part of the world. So I feel like for the content, I'm in for that.
Baseball too. We need to go to a baseball game.
Oh man, I went to a couple baseball games there and it's legit.
We're going. All right. 2025.
They have workers that walk up and down and they have beer backpacks and they fill the beers. Like they fill the beer in front of you. Like it's basically like it's like a draft beer keg on their back and they fill the cup right in front of you when you order it.
Well, CJ, we got through it today. Your flu pod, once again, I feel like every time you're on a flu pod, you do really well, but you did well. Good on you, dude.
Yeah, I get a little ornery. I'm battling the flu. You're battling the Wi-Fi in Seattle.
Yeah, this Wi-Fi. I'm not going to swear.
I'm battling a little bit of the holiday stress because I'm realizing, holy crap, I still got to buy some presents.
Ooh, don't get me started.
So there's a lot going on here, but we did get through it, buddy.
Thank you to everyone who tapped in and listened in. We inch closer and closer to episode 300. Subscribe to the podcast and leave a like and a rating, and we'll talk to you all Thursday. Peace.
The Chris Johnston Show. Follow Chris on Twitter @ReporterChris and follow Julian @JKA McKenzie.
The Chris Johnston Show.